What's up guys, hello to Footballtalk here, kicking off week 2 of a divisional draft and roster breakdown series. Already did the NFC and AFC North, so now we head east and look at the Cowboys, Giants, Eagles and Commanders. If you missed the last two shows, I'm looking at these draft classes of all 32 NFL teams, one division at a time, give a quick scouting reports on every single player selected, other than the 3 or 4 per video I didn't get to in my film studies, talk about what I think everybody was able to accomplish, how the new faces fit within the rest of the roster, and what it means for those franchises. Timestamps are available down below, and so is a link to my page hellotofootballtalk.com if you want to get to know these names even better, since I have detailed draft profiles on like 120 prospects up there, as well as some undrafted free agents to keep an eye on. Let's not lose any more time now, however, and kick things off with the Dallas Cowboys. I'll quickly run you through the 8 selections that they made, and they started things off with a couple of Michigan guys. First round, 26th overall, Mazi Smith, the tier defensive lineman, and second round, 57th overall, Luke Schoonmaker, the tight end. Then in the third round, 90th overall, DeMarvin Overshown, linebacker Texas. Fourth round, 129th overall, Williami Fehoko Jr., the edge defender out of San Jose State. Fifth round, 169th overall, Azim Richards, the offensive tackle out of North Carolina. A couple of 6th round picks, 178th overall, Eric Scott Jr., cornerback Southern Miss. And 212th overall, Deuce Vaughn, the running back out of Kansas State. And then he wrapped things up in the 7th round, 244th overall, Jalen Brooks, wide receiver South Carolina. It very much felt like the Cowboys would go tight end here in round 1, but the Bills moved just ahead of them to select Utah's Dalton Kincaid, who had significantly above Notre Dame's Michael Mayer and the rest of the class. And seeing the footage of Dallas' draft room, this came down to Syracuse tackle/guard Matthew Bergeron and Mazi Smith, which if you think about them having to battle two extremely physical teams up front in the Eagles and 49ers for the NFC, makes sense. Mazi is built like a fridge at 6'3", 330 pounds, but he was the number 1 player on Bruce Feldman's freak list, thanks to his reported recon drill below 7 seconds and insane numbers in the weight room. He was asked to play out of this backloaded 4-point stance a lot, where he counted on his ability to mirror the first steps of the O-line, stay square and own his ground, as well as flatten down the line from the backside and create stops in the run game. As a pass rusher, that role wasn't very beneficial towards major production, but he has the force in his hands to dig through one shoulder of the guard and packs an effective push-pull maneuver. While we did see the explosiveness pop a few times when allowed to actually attack up the field, of course having just half a sack for his career is very underwhelming, and there's little diversity to his approach, while in run defense he can still improve his ability to defeat the hands and create angles towards the ball for himself. The Cowboys' defensive line is predicated so much on speed and winning the gaps that they needed a legit nose tackle to keep that second level clean and not open up lanes behind those guys shooting up the field. Mazi can force cutbacks on the front side, but also has the great lateral quicks as a 2-eye and chase things down from the backside. Looking at them being an average run defense versus one of the elite units, depending on if Jonathan Hankins was on the field, now you get a much younger player with more potential at that spot, so it makes a lot of sense, even though I personally had Mazi a little bit lower. Then they go right back to Michigan and do address the tight end position with Luke Schoonmaker, my number 7 tight end, and somebody who I thought was one of the safer bets in this draft. I had him more so in the 3rd round, but very capable inline blocker who can work on combos with the tackle on the front side of wide zone or sift back across, as well as take on insert or lead duties. You love the way that he can sink his hips to cleanly get in and out of transitions, has soft hands, and then rapidly gets that foot down to turn up the field. Just isn't going to give you much in terms of making tackles miss after the catch or working down the field as a vertical receiver, but certainly underutilized by the Wolverines' more old-school pro-style offense. The Cowboys did draft Jake Ferguson in the 4th round last year, who profiles as a similar player, and they're all kind of in the mold of Dalton Schultz, who just left in free agency. I'm interested in what we see from Mike McCarthy taking back over play calling duties, because this past season they were most efficient out of 12 personnel, and we'll probably also continue to see Peyton Hendershot. So maybe the receiving production will be more evenly distributed among the tight end group, but I expect Schoonmaker to ultimately be the guy in the 11 personnel, since they also traded for Brandon Cooks to give them a stronger trio of wide receivers. For the 3rd round pick, they stay in the state of Texas and get a fun linebacker prospect in DeMarvin Overshown. Definitely more of a slender build, but no fear to attack, and has the shorter explosiveness to beat blockers to the spot with consistency, light feet to cover ground in the pass game, and great length to extend his range, while being an absolute screen killer. However, he might be best deployed as a pressure player with his affinity for contact to run through backs and protection, as well as his closing burst to get home in loops, and as a cleaner play on different games, along with taking over the role as a quarterback spy. The lack of bulk does limit his ability to actually stack and shed offensive linemen, but if they get into his frame, he has a tough time coming off guys. While in the pass game, he was rarely asked to actually play man, along with the missed tackle rate still being a little higher up than you'd like to see. Linebacker situation in Dallas is what I'm really looking forward to seeing what those training camp battles look like. Leighton Van Der Esch was brought back on a 1+1 deal, but they declined his 50 option initially before bouncing back to some degree in 2022. And they got two LSU guys I really liked each of the past two drafts, in Jabril Cox and Damone Clark, which a lot of those fell due to injury concerns, but played like 400 snaps last year as a rookie, versus Clark only having logged 45 total in his 2 seasons in Dallas. I think we could see more of a rotation on that second level, but Overshown is brought in when they want to bring pressure, and Cox can be more of an asset in coverage, while Clark may be the designated second starter, especially on early downs. I'll try to go a little bit quicker here as we get to the day 3 selections, although Viliami Fehoko in the 4th was a fun watch as well. Plays with his hair on fire and creates havoc all the time, strong hands to set the edge, but hyperactive to not stay blocked as well, tests the balance of pass protector, and then converts power to speed effectively once guys start leaning into him to get off them, along with just keeping the hands working and finally getting off them to get to the quarterback. Put up an insane 66 pressures across 332 pass rush opportunities last season, but gets a little too undisciplined with wanting to peek inside of blocks in the run game, and lacks that acceleration of the arc to really threaten the outside edge of tackles. Not sure how much he sees the field this year, behind Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, and last year's second round pick Sam Williams. But a couple of those guys will be free agents next year, and D-Law will be 32 years old, so continuing to restock that room with guys that provide energy when given a chance. Asim Richards is somebody I really liked in the tackle class that lacked a ton of quality beyond that top 9 or 10 I would say, presents a thick lower half and already plays like a veteran, very consistent with latching his hands and accelerating his feet for contact, as well as the timing to attach, take over or peel off combos on zone concepts. Offers a quick first step to get to his linebackers and vertical pass sets, good sand in his pants to deal with power, along with pretty flexible hips when he needs to recover after being a tick late to pick up guys on twists. Lacks some reactionary quickness and body control to consistently be able to secure blocks in space, while in pass pro he carries his hands low and has a tendency of oversetting to the outside. But I think solid value here. They've drafted a couple of developmental tackles on day 3, Matt Veletsko and Josh Ball in recent years, but this guy's more ready to play probably I would say, and has some inside flexibility as well for this crew. I don't really have anything on Eric Scott Jr. or Jalen Brooks, who both have plus size but below average speed for their positions, but the Deuce Vaughn story of course is awesome, getting that draft call from his dad, who works in that scouting department, not supposed to overshadow the player himself, who pound for pound might be one of the best of this entire class. He's an historic outlier in terms of just being 5'5", 180 pounds, and that does bring some limitation in terms of a tiny catch radius, has to rely on cut blocks when asked to take care of anybody in pass pro, and he'd rather try to get into a foot race towards the sideline with a linebacker rather than take him on in the hole, but very little wasted movement when trying to navigate through traffic. The old mantra of hiding behind his blockers at that height does show up all the time, makes tackles in the open field look silly on a regular basis with his insane start-stop quickness, and then he's a legit weapon as a receiver where he can win on option angle routes against linebackers, but he tracks the ball so well down the field that you can send him on wheels and streak routes too. At this point, the Cowboys have Tony Pollard on a franchise tag, coming off that ankle injury that he suffered in the divisional round. Malik Davis is there more so as a power option, Ronald Jones and Rico Dowdle battling for a roster spot, and outlined Hunter Lipke as a versatile piece coming out of North Dakota State, among my favorite undrafted free agent fits a couple of weeks ago, who could make the cut as a fullback. I think Deuce makes his roster as a scat back, although his path is a little tougher than it would be in other places, since Dallas already has an outstanding return man in Kevontae Turpin. So looking at this class as a whole, you can argue that they reached in the first 2 picks, but they do address the biggest areas of improvement for this group. Overshown could easily be a starting linebacker for them, and they add quality depth pieces on day 3. You clearly see the direction of this team as a contender for the conference, who especially with Maz in the first round catered the draft strategy to those titans in the NFC, who have had a bit of a size or power advantage to some degree over them. Dan Quinn is back at defensive coordinator with a lot of the same pieces from a year ago, while having plugged the biggest hole I would say. We'll see what we get from Mike McCarthy, calling the offense, and how much he really did go into the lab during his time away from the NFL. This remains one of the most complete rosters in the league, and they did fill out the spots that were somewhat open, along with the second and third string. Plus, I pointed out on multiple occasions, it is easier for them with that kind of owner to spend cash on guys who might just only make the roster, but I love how they treat the undrafted free agent market, that can give them talented players for free basically, and they picked up several promising names. If you want to check out my UDFA piece over at HelloSoFootballtalk.com. But now let's move on to the New York Giants, who had pretty much a 100 pick break between the first 3 and the latter 4 selections. They actually gave up quite a bit in picks 160 and 240 in order to swap spots with the Jaguars and used the 24th overall pick on Deonte Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. In the second round, 57th overall, they went with John Michael Schmitz, the interior offensive lineman of Minnesota. Third round, 73rd overall, Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. Then almost 100 picks later in the 5th round, Eric Gray, running back Oklahoma. 6th round, 29th overall, Trey Hawkins III, cornerback Old Dominion. And then 2 7th rounders, Jordan Riley, the interior defensive lineman out of Oregon, and Travarius Owens, the safety out of Houston. Starting things off with Banks here, they clearly saw a drop-off from the 3rd or 4th corner to the rest, depending on if they considered Emmanuel Forbes as part of that top group, which it sounds like they did. I personally like Banks a lot better and had him in that 2nd tier after Illinois' Devon Witherspoon and Oregon's Christian Gonzalez. Very solidly built and put up elite testing numbers at the combine with a 4.35 in the 40 and the top mark among corners with a 42-inch vertical. Packs good force behind his hands and uses them independently to jam and reroute receivers, trusting his speed to not get run by in man coverage, but also shows good feel for space and communication skills in zone, actively condenses the edge in the run game, and only missed 1 of 39 tackles this past season. There's still room for improvement in his press technique to maintain contact throughout the release, and even when he is in phase, he tends to be overly reliant on tracking the man rather than trying to find the ball in the air, while there is a bit of a delay when he has to gain depth initially and then drive back forwards. With Adoree Jackson, Cordell Flott, and Amani Oruwariye as the top 3 outside corners on the roster, this was definitely an area of need, and I think they smartly addressed it here for a system under Wink Martindale that is reliant on smart guys on the perimeter who can be trusted in man coverage in order to be comfortable with bringing pressure. Especially considering that in the 2nd round, they still get a guy who I would have been fine with them picking with the top selection in John Michael Schmitz. My top ranked center in this class, very crafty player in terms of his hand placement and grip strength to take control of bodies in the run game, regularly sustaining blocks and zone concepts, and creating opportunities to cut up behind him. Yet he can also dig guys out of the gap and down blocks and allow his guards to pull. Keeps his elbows in tight and base low as he takes charge of interior rushers, being able to anchor against power, but also right guys off trap if they want to take wider paths around him. And then he also has the veteran IQ already to sort through games and help put the guys to either side of him when he's unoccupied. I'd say he's more of an average athlete who struggles a little bit if quick reaction movement is required, and every once in a while in pass pro, his feet can deaden just a little bit when he goes for 200 punches, but as far as college prospects go, about as ready as you're going to get. New York didn't have a single school center on that roster, so for this guy to fall to them here is tremendous. Plugs in straight away at the pivot, and I wouldn't be surprised if he holds it down for the next 7 or 8 years. And while they certainly were happy JMS made it to them in the 2nd round, Jalen Hyatt was a guy that they clearly were targeting after that. So they used pick 128 to move up 16 spots here in the 3rd round and secured themselves the speed demon out of Tennessee. Nobody struck fear into the heart of defenses the way that this guy did with the one thing he could do, and that was run by anybody and score from distance. Just watch the Alabama game where he blew by the coverage over and over again, instant acceleration of the line, but then has another gear to detach vertically once he gets even with guys, running a bunch of deep option routes down the field, and tracks that deep ball exceptionally well. He caught quite a few hitches underneath as well because opponents needed to respect his speed and give him extra cushion, while not being afraid of extending for the ball over the middle and having added some weight in order to clear arm tackles more regularly. His route tree was pretty simplistic, where it was either attacking down the field, hitches, or screens mostly. Does have that narrow build without the flexibility in the lower half to make more challenging cuts, and hasn't really shown anything in terms of contested catch situations. In fact, a lot of his big plays were the result of coverage busts. I do believe, however, while the Giants now have a bunch of guys that are best suited in the slots, where Hyde also lined up primarily, that ability to get behind the defense is a welcome addition and should help in making Daniel Jones become a trigger happy after he refused to push the ball deep for the most part last season. 99 picks later, they go skill position again and get one of my favorite running backs in this class, somebody I featured in the My Guys episode a couple of months ago already by now, and that's Eric Gray from Oklahoma. And he was expected to go around this range, maybe a little bit earlier, because he doesn't have home run speed. While he has improved in that regard, he tends to run towards daylight rather than setting up his lanes conceptually all the time, and he needs to do a better job of keeping his eyes up in protection. But in terms of staying square behind blockers or force defenders to commit, the ability to make the subtle adjustments to his path and weave through traffic, and then his ability to put safeties in hell when they're in one-on-one is outstanding. He also catches the ball very naturally and consistently is able to make the first man miss. Just absolutely love his game, and when he got a chance for the Sooners this past season as the primary back to prove himself, he really made the most of it. Obviously, he isn't going to dethrone Saquon Barkley in New York, but I think he's already a better back than Matt Breida, Gary Brightwell, and Jayshon Corbin. I've said before that I believe he can be a starting back in the NFL, and if they can't agree on something with Saquon after this year on the franchise tag, I would not be shocked if he's RB1 at this point next year. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the next two guys that the Giants selected, in Trey Hawkins or Jordan Riley, but I do like Javarius Owens, who they got at the very end, 6 foot flat and 200 pounds, team captain and 4-year starter with the Cougars, explosive with the way that he drives and routes from quarters. When given a chance to show off impressed man, his length and physicality can really shine, as he frustrates guys during the stem, times up well when he swipes through the hands of the intended target, gets on his horse against the run, and showcases great range from deep alignments to help him with explosive plays from his original spot. He can get sucked up a little bit too far and ends up having to curve his angle out towards the sideline, surrendering more yardage than he should, dropped multiple opportunities for interceptions last year, and he gets a little overzealous trying to drive up against completions in front of him, which is part of his relatively high missed tackle rate. Yet looking at the safety room beyond Xavier McKinney, now that they lost Julian Love in free agency, you're probably looking at Jason Pinnock and Bobby McCain competing for that second starting spot. Dean Belton is a guy that selected in the middle rounds last year, who's best suited as a big nickel. So I think there's a path here for Owens to not only make this roster on teams, but also see the field for 200 to 300 snaps this season on defense, if things at least stay the way they are right now. Gotta be honest here, this was one of my favorite draft classes in the entire league. The value of Banks is right in line with what I saw from him, and I think it made sense for them to secure him by trading up a couple of spots. John Michael Schmitz, I would have been fine with them using that first round on, yet to get him at the end of the second. Hyde was marked late in the first round, still the week of the draft, and has a chance to make this offense more dangerous as soon as he gets onto the lineup. They get one of my favorite backs in this class late, and rotational safety inside the final 10 picks. Like I said, I didn't watch those two other names in the 200s. From the guys I do know about, they didn't make a single selection that I wanted to question, with plenty of surplus value throughout the draft. I like what Joe Shane did here a lot better than his first year as general manager of Big Blue, when that coaching staff already was able to paperclip things together and lead this group to a wildcard win. Now they're starting to find these pieces to make them a legit playoff threat. Moving on now to the Philadelphia Eagles. They give up a 4th rounder next year to the Bears in order to move up one spot from 10 to 9, and selected what I thought, purely based on tape, was the best player in the draft. So 9th overall, Jalen Carter, interior defensive lineman out of Georgia, and they go straight back to Georgia, 30th overall with Nolan Smith, the edge defender. Then they have back-to-back 3rd round picks, 65th and 66th overall, with Tyler Steen, offensive tackle / interior O-line out of Alabama, and Sidney Brown, the safety out of Illinois. 4th round, 105th overall, Keely Ringo, cornerback once again out of Georgia. 5th round, 188th overall, Tanner McKee, quarterback out of Stanford. And then in the 7th round, 249th overall, Moro Ojomo, interior defensive lineman out of Texas. Of course, general manager Howie Roseman didn't stop there in his pursuit of Georgia players, as they traded a 4th round pick next year for former Lions running back DeAndre Swift, but since they didn't include resources from this year, I won't talk any further about it here. Like I said, I thought Philly got the number 1 player in the draft here, which coming off a Super Bowl appearance almost feels unfair. But of course we're all aware of the situation, some of the maturity concerns with Carter. Don't give me that low effort bullshit some people in the media try to spread around late in the process to jump on top of the topic, but Carter is still facing a lawsuit. That's not for me to figure out, however. I'm just trying to tell you about the football player and how dominant he is on the field. The force in this young man's hands at first contact is different, where he can stack and shed or play that gap and a half, but more impressive even is his flexibility to slice through gaps and create chaos. It also allows him to turn tight corners as a pass rusher, with a quick hands to win cleanly off the ball, get home through contact, or be the one to take it to guys by riding the back into the quarterback's lap. He got away with not always winning the pad level battle, and he should work on getting to a secondary rush maneuver earlier, but this guy has the talent to be a perennial All-Pro player. He's definitely in the right environment there in Philly, as part of an established group of defensive linemen, and reunited with all those young leaders from the Bulldogs in a Kobe Dean at linebacker, Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis next to him. He could actually see a bunch of one-on-one opportunities and wreak havoc for this group right away. Which brings us to Nolan Smith, who many people expected to go anywhere from picks 8 to 20, but somehow he made it all the way here, and the Eagles cashed in on it. Now, I actually saw Smith in this range personally, because he's definitely on the side with all the measurables in the 17th percentile or lower, doesn't convert speed to power particularly well, or throws out effective counters at this point to work off his speed up the field, but this is one of the best pure football players in this draft, launching himself into blockers and creating stalemates with guys that outweigh him by nearly 100 pounds in the run game. His burst off the ball, backed up by a 4.39 and an elite 10-yard split that he had at the combine. When he lands those two-handed swipe moves, he's a problem for tackles to deal with around the corner. He's well coordinated to drop out in zone coverage or carry running backs turning up the field. Kind of reminiscent of a player that they already have there, and was in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year last season in Hassan Reddick. Nolan won't be moved around and asked to do stuff that doesn't set him up for success like Reddick had to go through in Arizona, and he will have a chance to stay fresh with Brandon Graham and Derek Burnett on the last years of their contracts, and we could see Smith rush from off-ball alignments as well at times. At the top of the third round, after trading back a couple of spots with Houston in exchange for a 6th and 7th rounder, they went to another little program from the SEC called Alabama and restocked on the offensive line. Tyler Steen was my number 8 offensive tackle, and depending on how quickly you think you can fix Jalen Duncan from Maryland, you can argue there was a major drop-off after him. His ability to center blocks, latch his hands, and take the appropriate angles towards the second level with the right timing of combos are tremendous. Quickly gets to his landmarks in pass pro, smooth lateral mover, and good flexibility to sustain contact as rushers try to dip underneath him. The only real issue I have with him on tape is the way that he struggles to absorb power at this point. And he has massive thighs, but he still has to figure out how to use his hands to establish first meaningful contact and unlock his hips to slow guys down. The thing is, while he probably won't be able to take much from the mountain Philly has on the left side and Jordan Mailata, or Lane Johnson on the other side, relying on the hug or double under technique, where he's strong enough to grab underneath the pass of the defender with both hands and absorb as he lets them engage first. But not only do I believe in offensive line coach Steph Stoutland finding the right solution for him, but Steen probably starts at right guard in place of Isaac Seumalo, where rushers don't have the runway against him, and it won't be as much of a problem, before they have options later on to kick him back outside. Philly also had the next selection 66th overall, thanks to that weird pick swap minutes away from the start of the draft, due to the settlement for the tampering case involving new Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon, when he was still preparing for the Super Bowl as the defensive coordinator for the Eagles. Felt like the NFL kinda tried to sweep this one under the rug, and probably don't want to create a precedent here with tampering allegations. I'll focus on the player because I highlighted him as one of my guys at the start of April, and that's Sidney Brown, who was my number 2 safety behind only Alabama's Brian Branch. Absolute kamikaze style of player, showing no fear of filling the C-gap and dealing with bigger bodies, lining up on the edge of the box for the most part, where in coverage he was a tight end specialist, who despite only being 5'10", has that stocky build at 210 pounds to stay in phase with guys as they try to use the size against him. Incredible feet and hips, where even if it's leveraged the wrong way as his guy initiates the break, he can redirect in a hurry and disrupt the catch point. The lack of length is a bit of a minus in a full-time slot role, and he didn't spend much time in deep coverage, but what he really needs to clean up is his tackling, having missed 14 of 74 attempts this past season, where he's oddly losing his balance as he's redirecting and failing to wrap up properly on too many occasions. He just needs to learn how to come to balance and shoot his hips for contact. But if he can become more reliable at bringing people to the ground, I think he legitimately has the ability to be a Brian Dawkins type of player for Philly. As crazy as that sounds, I just love this kid. And they made it a point to continue with the Georgia run, as they gave up a third rounder next year for pick 105 and cornerback Keely Ringo, a guy who a year ago today was projected to be one of the top 2 corners of the board. Even midway through this past season was considered a likely first round pick. I understand the concerns in terms of some clunkiness in his transitions, because this kid is built more like a linebacker, and what he really struggled with this past season was anticipating routes. That's why he couldn't mirror releases and consistently seemed to be a step behind in man coverage. With that being said, you're not going to find many 6'2", 205-pound athletes who run a 4.36. When this guy does connect with the jam, he can throw receivers off in significant fashion, and then has the speed to run with basically anybody, along with outstanding ball skills down the field. In run defense, he's a mismatch against most receivers, discarding them and then being the one to set the tone as a tackler, just tossing smaller guys to the turf, but also creating instant stops against bigger backs out in the perimeter. The good thing is, he won't need to be out there right away in Philly, after they found a way to bring back Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Where I do actually think Ringo would be best suited in the NFL is as an oversized slot defender who can throw off the timing of routes for offenses trying to cash in on those quick hitters, be a plus in run support, and blitz off the edge every once in a while. Maybe he's the eventual replacement for Avonte Maddox actually. Tanner McKee in the 6th round is good value. I had him as my QB8, and I think he can be an excellent backup in the NFL who sticks around for a long time. 6'6", 230 pounds, good mechanics, smooth release, can drive the ball or lay it in between zone defenders as needed, maintains a throw-ready base, has NFL type of footwork with incremental movements in tight spaces, sees the field well and gets the ball out quickly, does have that lanky type of build and over-the-top throwing motion, which elongates his delivery, doesn't have the suddenness to make rushers miss or give you a whole lot as a runner, but when kept clean and operating in rhythm, there's a lot to like about him as a pocket passer. That's why I'm a little bit confused, however, because you're not going to run the same type of offense with him as you do with Jalen Hurts. In terms of the RPO game and throwing it up for guys down the sidelines, yeah, but not at all as part of your run game. And finally, Moro Ojomo here this late, also very surprising. Played all over the line for the Longhorns, able to create knockback in the run game regularly, and while he features a more compact build, he does have 34.5-inch arms, but also the flexibility to contort his body and create penetration. Simply needs to do a better job of working the half-man relationship in all areas and rushing the passer. He doesn't get to secondary rush counter nearly as quickly as he should, but he has the natural power to create push up the pocket, corner his rushes effectively, and then yank off to free himself late, while being a valuable asset, crashing into bodies and open up lanes for his fellow rushers. That Philly D-line is just absurdly deep, and it's not even a guarantee that Ojomo makes the active roster straight away, even though I believe in other teams he plays 300 plus snaps as a rookie, so this is just silly. And so was his entire Eagles draft, to be honest. You get the best player in the draft purely based on tape, an outside linebacker who runs a 4.39, probably a day one starter at guard, and a missile at safety, along with what was considered a first round corner like half a year ago still, and then some depth pieces late. This is about as good as you're going to get. I understand that there's some people getting annoyed with fans and the media hyping up what general manager Howie Roseman constantly does, but I say start drafting the top guys available and finding value in every corner like he does, and I'll start talking about you too. The whole Georgia to Phil graduate program thing is funny, but if those are the best names available, which they probably were for many people at those spots, why not take the guys from a historically great defense and put them back together for you? This was already the best all-around roster in the NFL, and they might have separated themselves a little bit here. Which brings us to a final team of the day, the Washington Commanders, a team that certainly didn't go by consensus boards off the jump, when they gave us the second real shock of the first round, after the Lions had already selected Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall. So with that 16th overall pick, they selected Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback out of Mississippi State, second round 47th overall, Jatavius Martin, safety out of Illinois, third round 97th overall, Ricky Stromberg, interior offensive lineman out of Arkansas, 4th round 118th overall, Braden Daniels, also interior offensive lineman out of Utah, 5th round 137th overall, KJ Henry, edge defender Clemson, 6th round 193rd overall, Chris Rodriguez, running back Kentucky, and 7th round 233rd overall, Andre Jones Jr., the edge defender out of Louisiana. So I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I listed Forbes as one of the biggest reaches in the big draft recap that I put out after the event had concluded, and I'll stand by it. You can't draft a 166-pound corner with some stiffness in his hips, lacking play strength, and who missed 15% of his tackles this past season. Now, he is a fun player, his ability to click and close an off-man, the general instincts and football IQ are all over the tape, makes plays off his landmarks, and insane ball production are undeniable. By now we're all aware that Forbes is the FBS all-time leader with 6 pick sixes in his career, but if you watch the highlights even, quite a few of those interceptions are him actually being out of phase, and a throw inviting him back into the picture. I think as somebody with 4.35 speed, to run with anybody down the field, and his knack for making plays on the ball is special, but he's a massive physical outlier, and the reason I'm really down on this is that Christian Gonzalez from Oregon went to the Patriots a pick later. I do believe I understand the idea here, with defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio adapting more match zone principles, where he'll be in a lot of quasi-man, but with his eyes on the quarterback and be able to make things happen. They certainly needed to address corner here, but even if they're looking for more of a zone player with plus instincts, I think even a nearby product in Deontay Banks from Maryland would have been a better option, who maybe doesn't give you the same kind of ball production, but much better size and tackling skills. I do love Jatavius Martin II, however, to lock down the slot for them. Legitimately insane athlete with a 44-inch vertical, 11.1 broad jump, and 4.46 in the 40 at just under 6 foot and 200 pounds. Was asked to fill a lot of shoes for the Illini, but at his best shining on slot receivers, with patient footwork off the line, great length to widen the release, and the burners to stay in phase, and then the vertical prowess as well to contest the catch point. He had a play last season where he turned his head at the last possible moment, and was still able to pick off a slot fade route against Minnesota, I believe, which was super impressive. He earned an elite PFF run defense grade in 2022, taking the appropriate angles when he did play from deep alignments, using his long arms to keep his frame clean, and then being an uber reliable tackler, missing only 7 of 127 attempts these past 2 years combined. More savvy route runners can get him with a little bit of extra at the top, and he gets a little too enamored with wanting to peek back at the quarterback if he thinks he's in control of the route, while he could be vulnerable to some push-offs by big tight ends due to a more of a lanky build. However, I believe in terms of coverage profile, he's as good as you're going to find at the nickel, and with those explosion numbers and range, he could be an asset playing deep as well. So he gives some versatility and an ace in the secondary regardless of alignment. With the other day 2 pick, Washington addressed the center position with somewhat of a late riser, not necessarily due to testing numbers, but just people getting to his tape late, I believe, in Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas. Rapidly erases that space towards defensive tackles on down blocks, stays square and runs his feet for contact effectively to create lateral flow and zone concepts, with the awareness for when to overtake, bump over, climb, or peel back on potential combos being created. Super consistent in his pass sets, getting to his spots and slide protections, fitting his hands accordingly, with the quick feet to mirror lateral movements, as well as the strong base to anchor against power, and he makes sure to help out his buddies when he's not matched up with anybody. You see him get backdoored on zone concepts at times, struggles a little bit with sudden movement by second level defenders in the run game, and he tends to bend at the waist more so late during pass pro reps. This was a bit surprising, considering that Chase Ruley has been his plus starter for Washington at the pivot when healthy, but they released him the week after, and now Stromberg will be competing with Nick Gates and Tyler Larson for that starting gig, which I expect him to win and be a solid starter for a while there. Washington went back to the O-line with Braden Daniels early on day 3, has quality experience at guard and tackle. You love the way that he accelerates his feet into contact, but even more so how easy a mover he is, getting his hips turned to reach or scoop block guys, as well as cut off angles for guys on the second level. Great lateral movement skills and ability to frame rushers, keeping his hands in a punch-ready position and showcasing good balance, and of the mental fortitude to sort through games. Does have fairly short arms, right around the 33-inch mark, and small hands. Too often you see him get long arms by guys off the edge, and that's why many people think he's better suited to play inside full time, while you see him whiff on some drive blocks when there's more of a runway, because he doesn't strike with that inside hand. Outside of those options that I mentioned at center, I think the only guy beyond the starting 5 that seems to be in line to make the roster is Cornelius Lucas, so this makes a lot of sense to give them somebody with the versatility to play guard or tackle as a backup. They get a couple more edge rushers, nearly 100 picks apart, in KJ Henry and Andre Jones. The first isn't like a high-level athlete with just 1 season as a starter, and he has a bad tendency of wanting to peek inside of blocks, but hyperactive run defender who doesn't mind at all throwing his body around, packs some wicked hand swipes and shake to him as a rusher, while regularly fighting through the reach of blockers. He was the best guy in 2022 among a loaded Clemson front 7. Meanwhile, Jones has plenty of pop in his hands and elite length, with arms at over 34 inches, able to condense the corner regularly with a long arm, and then packs a nice spin move once he's even with the quarterback. Needs to do a better job of playing half the man, not much finesse or quick twitch to his rushers, and probably more of a deep and rotational guy. Hopefully we can finally see healthy Chase Young again this season, since he's been a non-factor almost since his Defensive Rookie of the Year season 2 years ago. Montez Sweat, meanwhile, has grown into an excellent starter, but really beyond that, there isn't a ton of established talent, maybe Afe Obada, but Washington adds some much needed depth here, and I think Henry turns himself into the primary backup at defensive end. And finally, Chris Rodriguez, a rugged back from Kentucky, very much in the mold of some of the other Wildcat runners that we've seen enter the league in recent years, setting the tone for the offense and churning out yards through tacklers, averaged 4 yards after contact for his career, uses different pacing and subtle shifts his path, effectively set up rushing lanes, and you see him quite a bit where he should lose 3 but gains 1 yard, tends to overreact to color flashing in the backfield, and takes an extra step or 2 to redirect when needing to find a different path. Also lacks the speed to pull away from guys in the pros, while only having caught 2 passes coming into this past season, so I don't expect him to take anything away in the passing down work from Antonio Gibson, and Brian Robinson has a little more juice to him as a runner. Depending on if they carry 4 guys on game day, Rodriguez will be battling for the final spot with Jared Patterson. So all in all, I get what you were looking to accomplish here, addressing legit areas of need with a couple of spots in the secondary, and otherwise shallow offensive line and group of edge defenders. For a team that made some strides last season, and we'll see how they continue with Sam Howell, now as an unproven quarterback, who they really didn't throw out there until week 18, and now just puts Jacoby Brissett behind him, who should really help him as a backup, but he's very capable of handling what Eric Bieniemy will ask of those guys in what should be a vertically oriented passing attack. Lots of reasons for excitement defensively. If they can get Chase Young back healthy finally, the top 3 guys from this class probably all start week 1. And even though I thought they had a chance to take advantage of a strong tight end class, well, I like some of the guys that they have there, but we haven't really seen Logan Thomas be productive for an extended stretch for a while now. Big year for the coaching staff and the new ownership, and hoping for quarterback they didn't throw out there until the very last game to make them competitive against the 3 other teams in that division who all won playoff games this past season. Now, how do those 4 draft classes stack up against each other? And as always, these are rankings on just how well I think they drafted, although in this division, this could actually be the order of how they finished 2023. Philly at the top, definitely one of the 3 best classes of this entire draft, up there with the Steelers and Colts in my opinion. You keep the Georgia to Philly connection strong, getting my number 1 player on the board, and making value selections all the way until the 7th round, while addressing areas that they may need to restock. Another home run by Howie, and hate out there by fellow executives is just weird by now. Then I think the Giants would have been the top most divisions with what they were able to accomplish. The top 3 for them is really strong, with 3 guys that could have been options for them when they selected originally in the first round, to be honest. In Deonte Banks, my number 4 corner, the top center available in John Michael Schmitz, and arguably the most dangerous deep threat in the class in Jalen Hyatt. They get what I believe can be a starting running back in this league in the 5th round to put behind Saquon and see where they go a year from now, and then a special teamer and sub-package player on defense at the very end. Along with the moves that they already made prior to the draft, this feels much more like a playoff contender after Brian Daboll and company sort of paperclip things together and somewhat got this team to win a road playoff game. Dallas hasn't been as well received, I feel like, and I do agree that they slightly reached on some names, but they all make sense as part of the spectrum of what they still needed in order to battle those elite teams in the conference. They add a couple of highly athletic pieces to replenish the youth in the defensive front 7, find a cheaper replacement for Dalton Schultz at tight end, and insulate themselves against injuries to some of the frontline guys. And the Commanders at the bottom here, unfortunately, don't hit the class at all, but I explained why I thought Emmanuel Forbes was early at 16th overall. I thought they missed a chance to attack tight end in a very strong group this year, no substantial surplus value selections to speak of, sort of just filling out the roster for a team that I could see a major shift happening next year if new ownership wants to put their stamp on the direction of this franchise to some degree, especially if the 3 other teams above them are close to as successful as they were in 2022. So here you have it, the NFC East is wrapped up. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then showing me so with a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel if you haven't yet, and maybe sharing with a fan of one of these teams would all be a big help. I really don't think there's more compact information available out there on all of these names, so I hope you join me on this journey for all 8 divisions. The NFC and AFC North videos are already available if you haven't checked those out, and I've got even more detailed draft profiles on almost all of these guys, as well as a bunch of other stuff at my page helloswithfootballtalk.com. Link for that is down below in the description, along with my social media handles. Feel free to follow me there to stay up to date with my work and get in touch with me. We'll switch back over to the AFC side later this week with the Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets, potentially the best division in football right now. Make sure to not miss that episode. So until then, see you later. Peace!